Okay, I'm recording. Hello, everyone. It is Wednesday, April 22nd, 2020, and this is the office hours for the Image Builder, a subproject of SIG Cluster Lifecycle. Just as a reminder, this meeting adheres to the Kubernetes Code of Conduct. This meeting is being recorded and it will be uploaded to YouTube. I've dropped a link to the agenda in the chat. If you feel so inclined, please add your name to the list of attendees, and I will do that right now. And so I put in some agenda notes here. Please feel free to add. Right now it's everything I could think of, which is basically just a review of what's been going on and some interesting outstanding items to talk about. Starting off with a few updates over the last 2 weeks, changes that have been made in the last 2 weeks. A couple things from me. It was only me and one other community member 2 weeks ago, so this might be new to some people, but I'm working on having this image builder take over building an additional or a secondary OVA that is needed for the cluster API provider for vSphere project. It's a HA proxy load balancer OVA. I'm porting that over. That PR should be open today. It helps immensely to have the same tool generating having the same tool generating OVA, so you don't end up with different metadata and different styles and things like that. It will significantly decrease the maintenance burden for myself and the CapV maintainers. Another thing also on the vSphere side of things, we had a wonderful contribution from a community member adding a new support for a new builder that's been in Packer since 1.5.2, I think, if I've got the version right. And that is the vSphere ISO builder. So the current one was, you had two choices. The VMware ISO builder, if you wanted to build something, you either had to be referencing a local hypervisor like Fusion on Mac or Workstation on Linux, or put in kind of some hacky things to reach out to remote ESX iHost. This new one gets rid of all that and just uses vSphere APIs, and it's much cleaner and nicer. And then the last update that I put in the agenda was just merged yesterday, I think, with the new release of Containerd being bumped to 1.3.4. Jason DeTibris opened a PR to rev that, and that's the default in the image builder for cluster API images now. So that's everything that I know of that has been the major items that have changed the last 2 weeks within building images for cluster API. Before I go on to discussion topics, is there anything that anybody else would like to bring up, so I'm not the only person talking, or should I just dive into the agenda as I put in some notes there?
Yeah, Prakash here from Dell. Yeah, last time I had attended and I was trying to follow on the OpenStack track of it, but still I'm not ready for it.
Okay.
Because OpenStack, I'm trying to follow right now what the control plane does, and I have not even been able to review fully. So I do wish to follow later at some point of time, maybe a week or two down the line. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I remember when we talked 2 weeks ago in this meeting, you were kind of just getting started with Cluster API. Were you able to find their kind of office hours and meeting times for asking Cluster API specific questions?
Yeah, I did, and I did follow up with them quite often now.
Oh,
at
good.
least I have attended a couple more and got hang of it, at least getting over. And thanks for the introduction and all the details.
Perfect. Yeah, awesome. I'm glad to hear that's moving forward. Okay, anything else before I move on? All right, I will just do so. So the first thing I put in under discussion topics was something I wanted to bring up because this is something that I'm getting from requirements at my employer, which is, you know, the image builder tool right now for Cluster API. Me and a couple other community members, we build images pretty much with all the defaults in the image builder as it exists today. Jason Datibris builds them and pushes. And let me clarify that this is for Cluster API, not the stuff that Justin Santa Barbara is usually taking care of. But we build AMIs and make those available to the community. I build OVAs, make them available to the community. But the intent of the Cluster API builder is for people to be able to build their own, whether they're enterprise users, they have their own requirements, additional packages that they want to inject. It's a little ugly, as Moshe knows, but there's lots of little knobs where you can inject additional packages and all that kind of stuff. So the question has come up about how do we validate the image as being something that can be successfully deployed by Cluster API. And I don't mean from a CI/CD perspective, I mean more from like an image scan perspective, like boot the image and what's running. Can we validate the versions, say, I mean, it would be conceivable, for example, like Cluster API only supports Containerd, but there's enough knobs in there, you could probably rip out Containerd and install Docker. If someone did that, how would we catch it? I know that's a far-fetched example. And so I was wondering if anybody had any thoughts on this. The little bit that I've looked into it, my thought so far would be the AWS, the Kappa builder right now is using GOSS, G-O-S-S. It does a very simple thing as part of its Packer provisioning to validate actually that Containerd is there and running, and not much else. I forget what all it is. I could look, but as I looked into that tool, it's much more robust and much more capable than what is being done with it so far. And I was thinking about building on that, but I wanted to raise the idea and see what people thought.
So I think image validation is great, but I think it would need to come after a CI/CD step. So how would you run the validation if you don't have CI/CD? Is that just running it manually on your desktop before you push an image?
Yeah, I mean, right now the Packer, like the Kappa stuff, has a GOSS plugin for Packer, and yeah, it runs it as part of building the image. But I don't necessarily think that's trustworthy. Like, I also want the ability to for someone else to give me an image and for me to scan it myself. And this, I mean, this comes from, like kind of like an enterprise support scenario where a product that I work on, we might allow customers to build their own images because they want to use a different distro than what we built our image on. We want to be able to take it and say, hey, does this have everything in it? Yeah, and not super deep, but like the high level points of that. And it seems like GOSS could do that, but having it automatic as part of Packer is great. But also, I need to be able to run it separately. But GOSS can do that as well. It's just an extra step. It seems like I could potentially put public upstream GOSS definitions for what we check for, and the fact, yeah, exactly. And then those can be extended if anyone has a reason to look for additional things or put more restrictive requirements in place.
So I think there's actually quite a lot that we'd want to put in there. Things like the entropy, the NTP, there's all of the knobs that we've turned on. We should be testing that they're turned on, type of thing.
Yeah, so, I agree. I think you could put a lot in there, and yeah, I hadn't really familiarized myself with GOSS before. I don't know what the origins of using it for Kappa are, but it is a tool for server validation, and I'd rather use an existing tool and build off of something that we are already using than try to create something from scratch, which would probably not go well.
Yeah, and compared to the alternative, which is InSpec, GOSS is definitely much nicer. So I'd +1 the GOSS.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have experience with these tools, so any feedback you have there is very helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Is it InSpec or inspect?
No, InSpec. InSpec. InSpec is Ruby based.
Oh, like an RSpec kind of thing?
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on that? It's just something that is actually, I want to see if the community is accepting of that, because it's actually going to be my personal priority over the next few weeks, and I want as much of it to make it into the upstream repo as I can.
It sounds great. I'll just echo something that we're just coming across as like a networking bug, which was turns out to be some syscuddles. So there are a lot of things I imagine you will get lots of contributions.
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, once you start having those yeah, because it's all YAML for GOS about what to check for. You know, it's almost kind of like a regression thing. You're like, oh, if this was configured wrong, let's add it and make sure that we can validate in the future. Thanks. Okay, and then I guess the next thing I just wanted to point out some PRs that are queued up for Justin. A couple of them are super simple. I mean, I think you had referenced in the past that you might have some colleagues or members on your team that might be able to take over some of that, but like it's like a Docker change and a lints change, and they look good to me, but like I said last time, I don't feel comfortable approving stuff that's in the kube deploy. So I just wanted to raise them and bring them to your attention. Thanks for coming this week.
Yeah, thank you. I actually I cleared 2 of them. I approved to merge 2 of them, and so yes, it's the 2 more recent ones, which are actually a little trickier around like disabling Docker, which is actually interesting for this group. So the proposal is to disable Docker. When we pre-install Docker, we shouldn't automatically start it in case it installs an IP tables rule, which then locks us into either NF tables or legacy mode in a way we don't want. So
interesting.
That's why it's a little bit more surprising than you might imagine, but yeah, I will take a look at those as well. I think they're both actually tied into the Buster image, which is, I guess, the 2 remaining ones are tied into our Buster image, which is on the agenda. So that's great.
Okay, great. And then, so yeah, I wanted to check back in with Moshe and check on the CLI PR and kind of where that's at and what I can do, if anything, or just, yeah, get an update on it.
Yeah, so I should, yeah, so definitely by the next meeting, I want to have something merged ready. So I'll definitely get a bit more time over the next week or 2 to kind of finish that out. And I see now that Justin's got the container builder in Bash. I can probably try integrate that in as well.
I nearly did it in Go, but I was like, I'll just do it in Bash first. So I think Bash is a little more readable because it's more proof of concept. So just to clarify my usage of Bash.
Yeah, no, I understand. So, but yeah, so I'll definitely try clean it up a bit, add some more documentation, some more design, and get it into a usable state. Yeah.
Okay, the thing I was going to ask you was, I think, last time we talked about it, you said the thing that I could do to help was if there was a container image that was that held the Ansible Packer type builder. Is that still true? Is that something that the CLI would be able to use? I'm a little confused about how they would plug together.
So the question is, how much of the Ansible would remain once we switch to something that's more generic? So once we extract all of the configs out of Ansible and have a way to configure containerd, Docker, sysctls packages and whatever in a generic way across all the images? Is it just a matter of we want to provide a hook for consumers to run their own Ansible? Or is it we want to take what we have and run it? Because if it's take what we have and run it, then to make that downstream consumable, I do think we need a container image for it. The question is, how do we then integrate that container image into a CLI is another question altogether.
Okay.
But I think that could be done.
Yeah, I haven't published it anywhere, but I do have a working container image that includes Packer and Ansible in it and is self-contained. It even includes, I think, a version of Workstation that'll work to build the image. I don't know how viable that is, but I think.
Yeah, we can always have the CLI spin up the container for actually running Packer, and then all we're doing is generating the Packer configuration and the Ansible scripts on demand and feeding that into the container.
Okay, yeah, because I think one of the things that I was picturing was, and like I said, I don't know how much of the Ansible scripts would remain or not, but hoping that we could have like a configurable backend where you could switch between, hey, I've invested heavily in Ansible, even if it's not long-term viable, it exists today, and switch between it and your config Atom type provisioner, because you've invested heavily in that. And I think the first attempt at the CLI was trying to have that configurable. Is that still the case? I apologize, I'm probably asking the same question every month for 3 months in a row.
So the rough idea of the CLI is to have multiple phases and have an image go through those phases. So you feed an image in, and then a phase can be add something on top of that image, test that image, or convert that image from one format to another. So, and an image could be an AMI, an ISO, a raw disk image, or any one of those things. And then based on what tooling we have available to convert from which formats to which formats, you then have this matrix that says, if I start with a Docker image, I can go to raw. And if I have an AMI, I can go to AMI only. And if I have an image, I can go to AMI, G-Cloud, and whatever it is, so that you have this pluggable way of dealing with images so that we can single source something and then push it where we want. And then for those who don't want to single source, then they can use their preference.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's very much following the K-image ADM KEP that you and Tim Sinclair had wrote up about a year ago now.
Yeah.
Sounds like trying to do that, but I feel like that was very much keyed off of the stuff that Justin is kind of working on with the container-based build, because I wasn't sure if you could do one without the other.
So the container-based build is basically, it's just a different image format that we support. So your image formats would be container, disk image, AMI, GC, and Azure. And I can go from a container to a disk image, and I can go from a disk image to AWS, Azure, and GC. And because I can do that, I can start with a Docker container and then put it through 2 transformations, and then I can put it wherever I want.
Okay.
So it's just one transformation step in front of starting with a real disk image. So it fits quite nicely in it. You just have an additional transformation step in the beginning.
Okay.
And then the testing phase, we would then say your testing phase is going to run on an image as well. So give me a container and I know how to run it on a container. Give me a disk image, I know how to run it on that. And give me something where I can get an SSH connection to, and I know how to run it on that.
Okay. So I think if you're hoping to have something mergeable within a couple of weeks, that would be, like, let me know when I should look at it again so I can kind of see where it's going. And
Yep.
I would very much like to be able to iterate on it. I know you've got kind of the AWS initial implementation. Obviously, I'm interested in working on the vSphere implementation. Okay.
Yeah, so it would. I'm actually mainly do vSphere myself as well, so
Okay.
I'll be adding in vSphere and then the Docker stuff, and then second iterations can be GCE and Azure.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a promising update. be nice. You definitely have the record for the oldest outstanding pull request since October, and I think you should get a prize. I think you should get a prize for that.
A prize or a punishment?
No, definitely not a punishment.
Yeah. No.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, if there's nothing else to say on that, the other kind of main interesting thing that has come in recently is, yeah, Justin's work on a Docker or container-based builder. I don't know if I just wanted to put it on there in case there was something you wanted to say about it, Justin, or we wanted to look at it together. I've scrolled through it, but it's currently out of my area of knowledge. Like, I looked at it and I could see what it's doing, and it kind of fit in. Like I said, I felt like, you know, you had put out the unification proposal doc, which I've read a couple times, and I felt like it slots in with the K-image admin stuff that Moshe and Tim St. Clair had been working on. So like, I kind of see the broader vision there. But I wasn't, yeah, since it's such an early stab at it, I wasn't quite sure if I had the whole picture or not, or just want to see what you want to say about it.
Thank you. Yeah, so I put it up there. I mean, it is able to build images that, at least I think they currently work on KVM or QEMU and AWS. It's building a Buster image basically from scratch. You can sort of see how it avoids a lot of, or minimizes the amount of execution that happens. So it sort of, you can imagine how we might eventually get it to be reproducible, maybe. But it's, I like it from that perspective. It has some Bash scripting. The by far the most complicated, well, there are two complicated Bash scripts. One of which is how do you wrap a Docker image, which is basically a tar file, and convert that to an image, like a disk image, a bootable disk image, including copying the kernel and the bootloader into the whatever the equivalent of the master boot record is these days. And then the other complicated script is like getting a raw disk image into AWS is surprisingly difficult. And so like just there's a fairly boring script that brings up a temporary Amazon instance and SCPs, I believe, the disk image across, writes it to an EBS volume, snapshots the EBS volume. But that's just sort of machinery. The core of it, though, is like these two Docker files. I think they're called Buster Base and Buster AWS, and Buster AWS Base is or is from Buster Base, and they're very simple. So it's really easy to build images, I think, if you exclude the machinery. And I like it from that perspective in terms of like understanding what's going on, and we can have comments, which is nice compared to the tool I was previously using. And I think I really like what Moshe said around the idea of transformations, and I think that hopefully my Bash will go away, and we can make particularly those two complicated Bash scripts, and we can essentially get it to the point where you know, the logic to upload an image to upload a raw disk image to AWS is the same however you produce that image. So there's no need for it to be specific to this. And I think being able to plug in this work into the CLI would create a really, I think, amazing suite, because then you could say, well, I want to use Packer, and I want to do this, and or I want to use Docker or to build the images, or I want to use Bazel to build the images. I think that would be a nice. And then we have like tooling that consistently enables you to upload them to AWS, to GCE, to the Sphere, whatever your target is. That to me seems really exciting. So,
just a question on the upload to AWS. Can't you upload the disk image into S3 and then register an image out of that?
I am very happy to be proved wrong here. There are 3 paths, as I'm aware of. The one I took here, which is you basically upload and snapshot. The path where you upload to S3 and there's a import image API, and a third path, which is there is an explicit service called the image import service. I first tried the S3 one, and it looked like it only produced or I read about the S3 one. It looked like it produced what's called an instant store-backed image. So it's a different type of, as opposed to an EBS type image. It's a different type of image, maybe. And I would have had to convert it using the same process that I effectively did anyway.
Okay.
And then I tried the image import service, or the import export service. After a lot of work, I got it to actually get all the way through, and then it says unrecognized kernel. So it turns out that for whatever reason, unclear, the image import export service has a I guess whitelisted set of kernels that it accepts, and it's not a generic service. So like if you were using the Ubuntu 18.04 kernel, it would be fine, but if you probably were using the Ubuntu 20.04 kernel, let's guess, it might not be fine.
Oh, okay.
And I also felt like that this was a clearer, although the path is tedious, it is a clearer path, right? You know, we are effectively building a disk. Yeah, we build a disk and we snapshot it. That feels like I know exactly what's happening there.
And you can troubleshoot it if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
So is this true of every provider, having some kind of a restriction?
It's not true. It's not a restriction on AWS. I think it's only a restriction on their image import export service. And I think every provider has their own way of doing things. I think if you scroll down, I think there is still a script for GCP import somewhere. And the GCP import is you do just upload it, and then you upload it to GCS, and then you make a call of some sort. Although I'm not sure, maybe I deleted that file. But yes, then there is a call to register as an image, but it's not public. So, the image that you create isn't public. So that's a little bit, that's different there. So they will have their own nuances, but
I see.
Yeah.
So interesting.
And then the actual kernel that you use, I might be mistaken, but I don't see it. How do you select that kernel?
Yeah, so I'm actually installing it in the Buster-based Docker file. There's an apt-get install linux-image-amd64, which installs the default kernel yes, and then it only installs it, of course, into the container. So it's not actually, hooked up to the bootloader. And then there's a secondary step. But we also install grubpc again in the container, but it doesn't actually install on the bootloader because there is no bootloader in a tar file. And then that's the sort of complicated bit in the Methy script, which expands the tar file, builds a disk image, expands, bind mounts it, expands the tar file into that disk image, and then executes the grub install into the bootloader. So that's a little bit more complicated, like to follow along. Well, it's not that complicated to follow along. It's a little more complicated if you, like, it is a more complicated script, and then that one took a lot more work. But that I think is, that's the one that it's fairly independent, I think, of the tooling you're using, or it's definitely independent of the image, of the contents of the image, but it would need to be tweaked if you used a different installer than Grub, for example.
Okay. Yeah, I see it now.
Let's see. So one question I would have is basically next steps for this. Like what do you need? You know, it's labeled as a work in progress. What do you need? You know, what could I do for testing if you're looking for help? Or and then a second question I have with that is like, it's about kind of repo organization. I know we want to consolidate down onto one tool. The top level folder for all this is just Buster. So I'm wondering if like images would be organized by distribution and OS, or is this, you know, or is it based on a container builder? Should there be like another top level folder?
Yeah, it's great. So like, I think the next step for me is trying to get this as at least a candidate for the next, or for the Buster image that we do for COPS. If we're going to continue to do that, we're still undecided whether we want to. I think we still want to pre-bake images, so that would be the goal. And so Cube Deploy, I think is what it's called. The builder that I'm sort of maintaining would not have a version for Buster, and so we would then have a sort of end of life for that, which would be a good thing, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
And so one option is like, I put it in Buster because it's not going to go in Buster. I don't think so. Like that was a clear, like, let's put it in a straw man that we can all agree is wrong. It could go under Cube Deploy Buster or something like that, or whatever it is. I can't remember the exact path. And then I would hope we could use some of Moshe's CLI to replace the scripts in here. I would hope I don't know how important it is actually to share the Docker files themselves, but it would be nice if we could. I don't know if that really, like, Docker files aren't great at structuring, so like, you know, like tons of variations. So it might be that it's easier just to copy and paste rather than try to like have each like fully modularized Docker files, but we can try. Yeah, so I think getting it going, or getting it into an area that we're happy with to execute in that direction, I think would be good. I don't know if you saw, there is a cloud build file, so this can be built unattended, which is sort of nice.
And we also have an account, a GCP project available.
Perfect. So we could probably hook this up to build from that, and I think we could easily hook it up to build to upload to GCE. I don't know if we can today hook it up to AWS because I don't know if we have access to the AWS account.
Well, so we can run it on Prow and then use Prow to submit the jobs, the Cloud Build jobs.
Yes.
And then from there as well get access to AWS.
That could work. I'm just trying to think. I think we still need some privileges in terms of, so running doing a bind mount. I'm not sure you can do the bind mount. Well, you can do the bind mount in Docker, but you need privileged mode execution. So I don't know if we can do Prow there. So I'm just wondering whether we can get both the AWS credentials and privileged mode Docker in the same thing. But I imagine we can figure out a sequence. We could always upload. We could build it in one job and upload it in another type thing.
Yeah. So, and then I also have some Cloud Build to run KVM images, and then we can actually use that for testing images as well. So spin up an image, run some GOS on it, and spin it down again.
Right. Very cool. And yes, and so another thing is we could also then get some of the COPS jobs running Kubernetes tests with the image that we build.
That we produce, yeah. And then we have good end-to-end test coverage.
At least that happy path, yes.
Yes.
Hopefully happy path. The path that we make happy, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess if I move this into Kube Deploy subdirectory and tidy it up a little bit, Is there anything else that we need to? Is that reasonable as a path forwards, or what else should I be doing like in terms of getting it out of work in progress? What do people want to see?
No, I think it's fine.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. I don't have any objections to that path.
Okay, great, thank you.
The only thing is the upload to AWS. It depends on an existing VPC subnet and security group.
It does, and that's the kube deploy builder also depends on those and has docs on how to create them. It's because I think you basically need to create some VPC and security group regardless. I mean, you need SSH access to it. So I wasn't sure whether whether to try to create it on the fly or whether to just assume that it had been created.
Okay, well, if we go into a CLI, we can do that all in the CLI anyway, so.
Yeah, it was one of the ones where I actually wasn't sure whether even a CLI should be, it should certainly be separable because not all users that run the CLI will have permissions to create VPCs, for example.
So then maybe we just need to create like a VPC create script or Terraform script to set that VPC up.
I will split those off into that sort of thing. I'm guessing probably a script will be a little bit easier, but yes, some sort of script we can run that will, I don't know, maybe Terraform. I don't know. But I'll create one or the other to like pave the required AWS EC2 object.
Cool.
Thank you.
All right, well, that's everything on the agenda. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add last minute here? All right.
No,
okay.
Not today, but maybe next time.
Okay.
This is bi-weekly or is it weekly?
Bi-weekly, every 2 weeks.
Bi-weekly, okay. Oh, sorry, means once in 2 weeks, yeah, okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, well, in the spirit of SIG cluster lifecycle, going once, twice, 3 times. All right, thanks everyone.
Thanks.
Appreciate it today. Yep.
Appreciate it.